A major pattern change is expected to bring Arctic air along with an active storm track, and of course, that means increased chances of winter storms across certain areas of the country. Here to get as detailed as possible with this, I'm also going to give you my latest thoughts on the month of December. December definitely has a lot of people talking right now. We'll speak on why as we make our way throughout the video. My name is Mitch. Good Saturday morning. Hope you guys are doing awesome out there and having a wonderful start to your weekend so far. Subscribe if you haven't. Like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything I can pray about or pray over, please drop it in the comments below. Well, let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So let's start off with temperatures, and then we'll go to the winter storm potential across areas of the country. We're going to start this off with Thanksgiving Eve. That is November the 26th, the day before Thanksgiving. And as you can tell, the blue here in the middle of the country, that is our first cold front. Now listen, this first cold front is not going to be anything crazy at all. Just your normal sort of run-of-the-mill late November cold front, going to bring a slightly below average temperatures. In some areas, it'll be maybe as much as 10 to 15 degrees below average, but only for a few days. So we continue to make our way into Thanksgiving, and that cold front does make its way across the eastern U.S. So, we're waking up Thursday morning, Thanksgiving morning, and it's going to be quite chilly across areas of the country in the blue and the green. And these green areas, this is anywhere from several degrees below average to maybe as much as 12 to 15 degrees below average. So that's quite cold for late November standards. But anyways, we continue to move into next weekend. So this is next, Friday, the 28th. And this is pretty chilly conditions, but I don't think it's going to last super long. So we start to get into a week from today, next Saturday, the 29th, fully into the last weekend of November. And this is pretty chilly conditions across the eastern U.S. And this could trend colder. I would say this is one of the colder model runs for this first cold front. But, temperatures should begin to moderate, maybe a couple of cold air damming type days across the eastern U.S., sort of east of the Appalachian Mountains. And then we see the big cold front drop down. And I really think this will be true Arctic air. And this is getting into Sunday the 30th. And you can see there's a big time Arctic front dropping down into the south central U.S. And the Arctic air, of course, is overspreading the entire central U.S. And you see these Barney colors up here? Guys, this is really cold temperatures, anywhere from 20, 25 degrees below average. So not below zero, but below average. But some areas could get into the single digits, maybe 0 degrees or lower, sub-zero temperatures. But as you can tell, the eastern U.S. begins to warm up. And this is getting into December. We've had some changes on the AI model guidance, but as you can tell, this is some very cold temperatures moving into the country. And this is backed up now by the Euro, and Euro AI model sniffed this out first. It sniffed this first cold front out first. Once upon a time, several days ago, we were thinking most of the country will be dealing with a pretty warm Thanksgiving, except maybe the western U.S. Well, that changed up. So same thing with the Euro, first cold front blast through the eastern U.S., anywhere from 5 to as much as 15 degrees below average for a few days. It's getting into Thanksgiving. And we've really trended a Thanksgiving Day into a pretty chilly day across the eastern U.S. Like this is next Thursday, Thanksgiving, and it's pretty cold. How cold? Well, we'll get a little bit more detailed on that when we get a little bit closer. We're still trying to figure out the timeline of this, but as we continue to progress forward, it does have us holding on to some pretty chilly temperatures all the way through next weekend. And then you see the big warm up between the first cold front and the second big cold front, okay? Look, big time warming as we're getting into Sunday. And then, the Arctic really begins to drop down. This is getting into December the 1st. See those Barney colors right here? I know I keep saying that. That's something we say in the weather world when we start to see these colder anomalies showing up. And this is 25, 30 degrees below average. And that right there is a massive temperature gradient here, a boundary, quite literally an Arctic front dropping down. Where is this going to end up happening? But this is a very cold air mass as we're kickstarting December across the middle of the country. And yes, that is very warm temperatures to kickstart December across the southeast. Definitely not going to put you in the Christmas spirit. But some of this information could change. We take this all the way out until like the first Wednesday of December, December the 3rd, and you can see this cold air kind of oozes into the northeast, but the southeast sort of hanging on to those above average temperatures. But some of this information could change, but a good chunk of the country is freezing, very, very cold. Okay. And, just looking at one sort of operational run, the Euro from overnight, And I mean, guys, you can really see this. This is getting into the last evening of November, November the 30th, and you can see, very cold temperatures up here, warm temperatures down here, especially across the south. And as we get this in motion, this is getting into the morning of December the 1st. Look at these sub-zero temperatures. I mean, look in Yellowstone National Park, 18 below zero. I mean, and look at this tight gradient cold front, 70s across the south central U.S., for example. Let's move this a little forward. It's like 80 degrees in Houston for around 1 p.m. on this one specific model run for December the 1st. And it's below freezing for highs early afternoon, December 1st in Amarillo. So, this isn't totally unusual. We see this a few times a year in Texas where we have these crazy temperature gradients. But, locals call these blue northers, and this is definitely the definition of one. And how far, east does this cold air ooze? As we start to get into December 2nd, pretty far out, right? This is, definitely starting to get past 10 days out. It shows the southeast very warm, but a very chilly air mass. And, as we continue to progress forward, that southeast ridge is flexing, but a good chunk of the country as we get a few days in December, very cold. So enough about temperatures, right? What about any storm systems? I'm not about to compare a bunch of model runs for this because I think we still are trying to iron out the details. I'm going to show you one run, and I think that it's a reasonable output. I don't think that's exactly what's going to happen, but I think it's very possible. What you're going to see is this is getting into the 25th of November next week, okay, like next Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. Low pressure cutting across the Great Lakes. Cold air is going to follow. This will kickstart some lake effect snows, as we're starting to get, even into Thanksgiving. Okay, so we could have a white Thanksgiving across certain areas of the lake effect snow areas. And this is backed up with what I'm about to show you from the Climate Prediction Center. All right, so we start to get into next Friday. Okay, most of the country is pretty quiet. We're still dealing with some lake effect snows and some chilly air, cold air moving over the Great Lakes region. You see the blues, this is lake effect snows. But, as we're starting to get into next Saturday, a week from today, it's pretty quiet, but some Arctic air is really locking and loading up here and about to drop south like a hammer. All right, and then we're starting to see a lot of moisture coming up from the Gulf region and just the lower latitudes. It's going to clash up against some very cold Arctic air. We could have low pressures popping off a trough digging down, a boundary, and definitely the storm track is going to be right through here. Warmer air to the south, cold air to the north. So we're going to have a big time potential for a winter storm, an overrunning event. And you can see it's raining in Des Moines, but you go out to Sioux Falls and you got an all-out winter storm. Not a forecast. And this is getting into, December the 1st. But the pattern supports this. Big Arctic boundary over the middle of the country. Could have a winter storm risk even across the Four Corners region. This is all rain shooting up all the way into eastern Canada. And look, that's a big overrunning signal. Now, this is very far out. It's past 10 days, I know. But the pattern really, really, really supports this. And you see the pink and the purple, don't get too caught up in the specifics. It's like a wintry mix of, freezing rain, sleet, whatever. And then the blue is snow. And then, of course, you see the eastern U.S. is hung up in that ridge. So this is all rain. Okay, and it could be a warm rain for areas of the south. It could be thunderstorms. But then you get into this cold air that we just discussed. This is winter storm potential. Let's click this and make sure it get going. I've been using this new site. I love it. I love how you can expand the screen, make it a lot bigger, shows city names and stuff. I just wish it had like a dark mode. But anyways, don't get too caught up in this. But here it is. A winter storm down here in the southern plains into Missouri. Not a forecast, but the cold air is oozing into the northeast. And all of a sudden, you're starting to get, for example, we get really far out. This is all the way 300 hours out. I know. December 3rd, 4th time frame. Pattern supports it, though. Big low pressure, comet head, low pressure. This could be thunderstorms down here and big old winter storm across, areas of the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes region, the northeast. I know I got most of my people tuning in from the south. And I know you're like, man, I don't want to hear about all this. This is a bummer. We want winter weather to the south. But I got other people tuning in from other areas of the country. And listen, at the end of the day, the pattern supports cold and winter weather for a good chunk of the country going forward. It's just for the south, southeast, it really does not. And, I'm going to stop it there. Like I said, not going to show a bunch of model runs or anything like that. But we're going to start off a week from today. There is a little signal for some snow up here. And this is the central U.S. I'll show you the eastern U.S. here in a second. And this is in 72-hour periods. Okay, so you're going to see a snow signal show up and then disappear. Well, as we're starting to get between day 7 and day 10, so this is the last couple of days in November, first few days of December, you're going to see a signal really rise across this area. Now, one thing this does not show is ice, okay? But there could be an ice signal on the southern flank of the area of snow, okay? Where you got warmer air issues in the upper levels of the atmosphere. But anyways, that is a several-inch snowfall mean from, the Rockies across the central and northern plains all the way into the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region. That's a pretty solid signal for winter storms to end November to start early December across this area. Okay, and we continue, and the signal continues as we continue to get a few days into December. One thing I'll note, though, there is a little signal all the way down to Texas, not a snowfall forecast, so please don't look at this and say you're going to get an inch of snow in Oklahoma City or something like that, or Fayetteville. But the signal does drop, and I mean, that makes sense considering the fact the cold air does ooze south and east. So we'll continue to watch this. And you look at the eastern U.S., same thing, 72-hour periods. You're going to see with the first cold front, you see these little areas in blue coming off Lake Erie, Lake Ontario. Okay, anyways, you get what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I'm mixing up the name here. Guys, I'm good for a couple tongue twisters here. Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. You can see the lake effect snow areas really popping off here from this first cold front. Cold air goes over the relatively warm bodies of water of the Great Lakes still and pops off convection, lake effect snow. And then we start to get deeper into the cold pattern. And, for the most part, into the eastern U.S., not much of a snow signal. A lot of the cold air is still up in Canada. It's kind of oozing into Canada, but that could change as we get deeper into the run. You can see most of this is to the north, southeast, not showing much. I want to show you this, though. Pivotal weather, I love it for this. It shows the ice mean, the ice ensemble, which I think is really cool. It kind of gives us an idea where the areas that could be favored for ice. And listen, I'm not honking the horn for an ice storm, but when you have overrunning with shallow Arctic air with moisture overrunning it, you're going to run the risk of freezing rain and sleet. So this is really the freezing rain signal. And I think that we're going to have to deal with this the last couple days of November, first few days of December across certain areas of the country. It even shows it as far south as central Texas, which I think is a possibility. Has a little bit of a CAD signal here, cold air damming, kind of dropping east and along the Appalachian Mountains. I think it's very possible. So all this is backed up. I'm going to have to make this bigger here. All this is backed up by the Climate Prediction Center. The 6 to 10 day temperature outlook from the 27th through the 1st of December, issued yesterday. A good chunk of the country is leaning towards below average temperatures. If you live in the blue area, that's where we have a chance of below average temperatures in this time frame. I know this drops all the way to the south. You're thinking, well, we're going to be cool, right? Well, this is really showing that first cold front, and that's why you got the blues going all the way to the southeast. It's that first cold front next week. And I think this first cold front could bring some pretty chilly temperatures. I mean, even for areas of the south, we could get some highs in the 40s late next week into next weekend. But I wouldn't call it a real true Arctic air mass in my opinion, but the chances of below average temperatures are much higher once you get to the northern section of the country. And then you look at that active storm track I mentioned at the very beginning of the intro of the video. If you live in the green area, especially the dark green area, that's where you have an increased chance at higher precipitation. Whether that's snow, rain, well, we got to figure that one out. And then we look at the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. And then my folks in the southeast are not going to like this. And trust me, I don't like it. But it's the truth. And we've been discussing the possibility of a torch for the southeast to kickstart December for a while. But the 29th through the 5th of December, 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. Listen, most of the country are going for below average temperatures. The west, the central, the upper, and areas of the northeast. And there's a battleground right in between. Is going with below average temperatures. And then the southeast, it's a good shot at above average temperatures. And I mean, the colors get into the really, really warm colors very fast. I mean, it goes from just a slight tint of orange to pretty much red in Florida and other areas of southern Georgia. And we continue to have an active storm track in this time frame. So we got active weather on the way. I think we could have the potential for severe weather, winter storms, and then everything in between. A wintry mess in between. And just good old-fashioned heavy rain somewhere also. So it's going to be active times ahead. And, almost the entirety of the country between that 29th to the 5th is certainly going for above average, chances at above average precipitation. And here's a discussion from the Climate Prediction Center discussing, below normal temperatures likely for portions of the lower 48 to end November and begin December. Talks about the pattern change. And, I think there's just going to be wild swings. And you can pause this and read this if you want. It discusses pretty much everything. It backs everything we just discussed. And the risk of heavy snow. I mean, look at this. Lake effect snow areas, you're probably about to get yours. So my loyal followers up here in the UP of Michigan, you got some snows on the way. I think you're about to make an abrupt shift to winter. Same thing along Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, things like that. And then this purple outline area, slight risk of heavy snow. So if we look at the upper wind pattern, not the upper pattern, but the upper pattern when we talk about low pressure and high pressure, right? This is the part where, it's a little bit more confusing for the audience to understand, but I try to explain it. The blues that you see on your screen, lower pressure, it's a trough, right? Jet stream is really dipping down. And then this color right here, the warmer colors, this is higher pressure, a ridge. So this big area in blue that you see over the eastern U.S. down to the south, this is getting into Thanksgiving. This is what's going to bring our first cold front. All right, it's going to dislodge cold air from the south, and it's going to drop down behind this trough. So this can bring energy. Areas in blue, it can bring a storm system. It can bring energy, but it doesn't always mean a huge storm system. Could just bring a little bit of energy, and I think that's going to be the case with this trough right here. It's going to kickstart the lake effect snows. But I don't think we're going to get a big storm system out of this. But big spiking ridge, negative EPO, a brief positive PNA, ridging in the west, blocking, ridging into Alaska. This will dislodge cold air behind this trough and bring a lot of cold air for a few days across the eastern U.S. But this isn't locked in place. Okay, so if we get this in motion, right, a ridge immediately replaces that trough over the eastern U.S. This brings above average temperatures. And then we get this big old trough dropping down into the central to western U.S. Continue to have an amped up ridge all the way up into Alaska, that negative EPO, but we don't have that positive PNA anymore. We have that negative PNA, which is a trough in the west and not much ridging in the west. So, of course, this spikes the ridge. And I said this in a post on X yesterday. When you have an aggressive deep dive in the trough like that, and, the ridge like that, when the atmosphere really kind of hunkers down like this, the jet stream dives down, this causes the sides of this trough to really go up. So imagine somebody's like, doing a video of you slow motion jumping right in the middle of a trampoline, right? You jump right in the middle of it. It's going to cause the other sides to come up while you aggressively jump as hard as you can into the middle. The atmosphere is kind of the same. The jet really aggressively dives south, and this causes the sides to really buckle up. And that's what happens in the southeast and over here. But really speaking on the southeast, that's what happens. I always go back to that crazy February 2021, the infamous, Texas freeze. We had a trough that dove so aggressively in the middle of the country, it caused us over here in the southeast to get a ridge. And we didn't get any of that winter weather that everybody sort of along the Mississippi River and west got. So that's kind of what happens here. And this thing, really aggressively dives. And we got this cross polar flow, a real deep feed of cold air into this. And of course, we're probably going to have areas of energy with cold air diving in. And it's not going to dive in from that way. It really just dives into here. But it's kind of complex to explain. But this is going to spike that ridge right here. High pressure when a trough aggressively dives in like that. But as we move forward, how long does this ridge hang with us? We get 10 days out. On this specific run of the Euro AI model, it has the trough a little bit further east. So that's a trend if it develops into one that we need to watch. I've seen a tick on Euro AI ensemble guidance of this cold air being a little bit further east. But as we continue to get into a few to several days in December, we're still dealing with this pesky ridge influence here. A lot of cold air dumping out west into the central U.S. But the very end of the run, you can see the tilt and the trough changing. Still a bit of a ridge nudge into this. but cold air is now trying to kind of dive in a little bit to the eastern U.S. But guys, I keep saying this, cold is locked and loaded up here. It's just, where is it going to drop, right? I mean, I know a lot of times I tell you, don't view this map, the blue, as just cold air all the time. But in this case, the cold is really locked and loaded up here. Okay, it's just, where is it going to drop into the lower 48? And we're pretty confident it's going to happen in the western and central U.S. outside of that cold front next week, as we get to the end of November and to early December. Okay, now as we get into December, okay, we're going to start off where we just left off with the Euro AI ensemble. Let's look at the Euro extended. So we're into the 6th, right? I know it says December 7th, but this is the evening of the 6th. All right. Once again, big cross-polar flow and a dump of cold air into the lower 48, but it's not getting very far south. It looks like, to me, if we freeze it right here, active storm track right into here, cold air feeding into that active storm track. But down here, because of this ridge influence, is probably on the warm side, which is us in the south if you're tuning in. Not everybody's tuning in from the south, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, now we keep this rolling here. When we get into around the 8th, 9th, 10th, you can see the ridge is sort of shredded apart a little bit. A little deeper dive of this trough. What does that do? Not sure. But I'll be honest, and I can't diss on the Euro Weeklies because I've been showing it to you. But the Euro Weeklies it's honestly, it doesn't give me any good feeling butterflies or anything like that. It doesn't make me feel good for a winter and cold weather fan. It has a broad bridge across the southern tier of the country and a trough over Canada. All right, and probably with a storm track in the middle. I mean, as we get closer to Christmas, the ridge gets beat down a little bit. But the disturbing thing about the Euro Weeklies is it really flexes the ridge now through the most of December. Do I think that's going to happen? I don't know. I hope it doesn't. I'm going to be honest with you. I hope it doesn't. But the Euro Weeklies is not really great at all for areas of the south for the extended period. For the north, if you're a winter weather fan, it's fantastic. But I'm going to talk about some things that makes me believe that this will change. But first off, I'll show you in response of what I just showed you. What do these temperatures look like? Well, looks like most of your cold air is up here, but the deep south hanging on to above average temperatures. And it just looks like it's a classic pattern where the north is cold and the south is warm, and there's some sort of crazy gradient in between. But, as we start to get to Christmas week, it does show some of those warmer than average temperatures getting beat down. And, this is honestly backed up, and it stinks because I was really excited to see this. And this is the latest 3 to 4 week temperature outlook that was issued yesterday. And honestly, guys, I mean, this pretty much screams exactly what I just showed you on the Euro Weeklies. This goes from the 6th through the 19th of December. I know, we're using up a lot of it. Issued yesterday. South is warm, north is cold. I mean, that pretty much sums what this shows up, right? So, first off, one thing that I will say is, and I'm going to look at this really quick. Let's look. There's a couple things I'm getting a little bit off track here, but I'm just going to, speak on a couple things. No. And let's show you this. Let's look at the Euro ensemble. Let's go back to this. One thing that is encouraging is we are loading up snowpack in Canada. And I really like that we could load it up over the next 15 days in eastern Canada. That's where a better cold air source, our cold air source is better if it comes from there, from the north and areas of the south. So we're really getting the snowpack up here, and we're really juicing up, making that cold air source where our cold air kind of funnels down from the higher latitudes better. So we're loading up the snowpack up here. Could this set us up for glory later on down the road? I think it could. The second thing that I really think that we need to focus a lot on is the MJO progression. Okay, and I really don't think a whole lot has changed with this. So I'm going to explain this in the most simplest way possible. All right, you see 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 8. I don't know why I just did it that way, but hey, here we are. Okay, these are warm phases for the most part. Okay, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. 7 is still a cold phase for a lot of the country, but for the South it is not. But it normally brings cold air in November and in December, and it's about to. But 6, 5, and 4 are definitely warm phases. You can get shots of cold air. For example, we're going to kind of get a shot. For example, last week or the week before last, when we got that around the November 9th, 10th time frame, when we got that big Arctic shot of air across the central and eastern U.S., we had snow as far south as Alabama and the Carolinas. We were in phase 5 and 6, okay, which is a warm phase. So you can still get shots of cold air in these warmer phases over here, okay? But the phase that we need to work towards is 8 and 1, especially 8 in December. This is the glory phase for winter weather fans. If you live in the central to eastern U.S., pretty much the entire country benefits from this phase if you're a winter weather fan. Okay? So what phase are we in, and what phase are we working towards, this MJO phase progression? Well, right now, we're in this jumbled up mess right here. For example, this 7, this is November the 7th. This 5th, November the 5th. So that's behind us, right? It's November the 22nd. All right? 9th, 11th, and then everything just gets all crazy right here. You can barely see if you look close enough the 22. So technically, we're like right here in a slightly amplified phase 6. So fully into phase 6 right now, right? It shows over the next 4 or 5 days or so, we're going to work our way into phase 7. You see this 26 right here? That is November the 26th here in the next 4 days or so. And then 28, 30, and then you see the 2. See that 2 and that 4 right there? That is December. So that's when we're starting to work into December here. So it shows us progressing through good old phase 7, all right, over a week or so time frame. And it looks like we're about to just roll into phase 8. But then everything gets kind of clogged up here for almost 2 weeks. And you don't want to see that, okay? It's not that big of a deal, though, and I'll explain why. But for everybody that's impatient, like your boy Mitch here, you want this to just hurry up and get into phase 8. But at the end of the day, it's still early, mid-December. Anyways, let's not get off track. Let's stay focused here. So we're in phase 7. As we get into December 2nd, December 4, that's not going to work for the southern areas of the country, especially the southeastern areas of just the eastern U.S. But phase 7 will absolutely work for the northern tier of the country, areas of the northeast, and normally the middle of the country, even the western U.S. And so the MJO progression that you're seeing here makes perfect sense when you combine it what we're seeing in long-range model guidance with all the cold air dumping into the central and northern tier of the country. And I'm going to explain why it makes sense here in a second. The good news is it shows us progressing as we get to about the mid-month time frame into phase 8. That could open the door up for a significant shift in model guidance. I think if we can continue to trend towards phase 8, model guidance in the long range is going to adjust to what the MJO forecast is showing. If we trend this to, say, getting fully clogged up in the phase 7 and then drifting like over here, it just ain't going to be good. Okay, but I don't like this little knot here where it goes from 4 and then just gets all jumbled up, kind of like how we are in phase 6 right now. I would like to untangle that knot. But to extend this really far out, there is a chance that we can slow ride this MJO progression through phase 1, through phase 8 and phase 1, through the most favorable climo period time of the year, which is late December into January. If that happens, opportunities are going to start to really show up for even areas of the South. So I mentioned how phase 7 backs up what we're seeing in model guidance. Well, if we look right here and we click on this, make this larger. All right, this is for, I think this is for, let's exit back out. This is for November, December, and January. It really makes sense, right? We're getting into phase 7, right? Okay, in the next few days. And if you look right here, most of the lower 48 is in that blue, which is below average temperatures. But if you look really closely, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you guys. If you look really closely, you see the southeast with some of those warmer yellow, orange colors. That's that ridge. And that's exactly what we're seeing in model guidance. And we're seeing some warmer temperatures out west. It doesn't 100% reflect what we're seeing. But then as we get into phase 8, you notice how the entire lower 48 outside of sections of the western U.S. benefits in December and January. And we start to open up that glory phase, and the potential is there. So at the end of the day, guys, if we can continue to progress into phase 8, if we can get to phase 8, I really think model guidance is going to shift for us. I really do. So we just got to see what happens. And, this is the latest Euro. And you can tell how, it's the 6th. There's just kind of a curling of this. And it looks like it's about to get sort of jammed up, even on the Euro run. And this is the latest one. You see how it, I'm just going to kind of hang out and go into a less amplified version of phase 7. What we don't want is for this to just kind of curl and go into the circle of death, which is right here. If it does that and we never get into 8, we're going to have some issues to kickstart winter. So let's see what happens. All right, today's weather, got really way too much into that, but what's new? Today's weather, we got some energy exiting the eastern seaboard. We are getting some beneficial rains. This is really beneficial the further south you get into the mid-Atlantic. Energy clogged up down here in the southwest, a little bit of energy up here, and then a little bit of energy moving into the Pacific Northwest. Not a big deal, though. Watches, warnings, and advisories. A lot of fog out there, and that is because most of the country is getting nuked with warm air. So normally that creates fog when you just have the clashing of air masses up here. Watches, warnings, and advisories as far as the risk of thunderstorms. The south could get some thunderstorms today, and there is a risk, a little small risk. Well, actually there is not, of excessive rainfall. I was assuming there. But any active weather, not looking likely. Could get some isolated downpours and thunderstorms across the Carolinas today. If you do, count your blessings. It's a good thing. We need the rain. I keep saying this, but I've not received measurable rainfall at my house in November yet. Here we are, the morning of the 22nd. Quite ridiculous. But the Northeast, we're going to continue to deal with some rain through about early mid-afternoon. A little bit of cold air filters in behind, but not the cold air that we're going to see later next week. But we are waking up to some festive flurries and snow across areas of the Adirondacks. One area that hasn't really had a slow start to winter is the Northeast. It hasn't really been talked about a lot, but you guys have been kind of stuck in a lot of troughing up here. And, it's been a pretty decent start to winter if you're a winter weather fan. Definitely has not been warm. Everybody else has pretty much been warm, though. Down here in the south central west, some thunderstorms dancing around the Texas coastline. But then most of the rest of the day is pretty quiet. Outside some energy shooting through New Mexico. North central U.S., there's that little bit of northern stream energy making its way through. This could bring a little rain, maybe some snow action to the UP and Michigan later this evening, but don't expect anything big out of that. And then the western U.S., we continue to have that trapped energy down near Baja California, and this will finally eject into Arizona. Will bring some widespread moisture across the state later tonight, and then this will fully move across the Four Corners region by the time we get into tomorrow morning. Temperatures, southeast, very warm, 70s and 80s. A lot of wind blowing those leaves around. Cooler temperatures up here, and then this is out west. So, hey, that's all I got, guys. Listen, folks, at the end of the day, there's a lot of antsiness out there. And, I made a long post on Twitter and on Facebook yesterday saying that, hey, I'm going to provide as much context as possible. And that's why this video is going on 35 minutes now. But all I can say, guys, is it stinks here in the South. We are going to, outside that cold front next week, we're just going to, and I hate it. I don't like it at all. But I also try to remember that, normally we don't get winter weather in the South in December. And always hold on to that childhood kid in me dream that we can get, a cool winter storm in the South around Christmas time. A lot of areas of the South got it. Say in 2017, 2018, for example. I know you folks in, the Alabama, north of Georgia, remember that, early December 2017 event. Then you had the early December 2018 event. But, always cling on to that hope that one day, we'll see a winter weather event, even if it's just an inch or two here in my neck of the woods in central South Carolina in December. But the reality of it is, it just doesn't happen. It's hard enough to get snow around here in the heart of winter. But, it does stink to kind of burn up a lot of December with warmer than average temperatures. Heck, I've even had some issues just being in this, wanting to turn on my Christmas music. And I know some people are thinking, well, why do you have it on anyways? Because it's November the 22nd. But I don't know. It feels like we're fully getting into the Christmas season now. But hopefully we don't burn up as too much of December on this, and we can get a good pattern flip here in the South as we get closer to Christmas. But if you live in the northern tier of the country, there's got a lot of opportunities coming up for you. But there's just going to be a tight gradient somewhere that's going to set up. And if you're south of that, you're just not going to get a lot of chances of winter weather. So we'll continue to figure this one out, guys. We'll continue to provide as much detail as possible. This is a long video. But God bless all y'all. Appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful day, and we'll do it again tomorrow.